Welcome back, everybody, to The Art of Doing. Today I want to be talking about my whiskey collection. What do I have down here for whiskey, and what do I think about the different types that I have? I'm going to be focusing on the non-Scotch whiskeys. To break it up, I think it would have been too big of a video to do all of it at once, and I'll tell you about some of the differences, and I'll tell you what I'm drinking here. I think you're going to like this one. Stay tuned. Hello everybody, my name is Ben Jackson and this is The Art of Doing. In this channel I'm looking to inspire people to live life to the fullest. I believe that life is made to be enjoyed, and one of the best ways to enjoy life is to find some of your passions, and without trying and doing new things you couldn't possibly know what some of your passions are. And I certainly have fallen into new interests and passions that I didn't know anything about. So in this channel I'm going to try to introduce you to a lot of different topics, and maybe some of them will intrigue you. Today I'm going to be talking about partially what's in my liquor collection. In the past I've done tours of my liqueurs, my rums, a bunch of different ones. I'll leave a link up above for the playlist for the rest of the tours that I've done so far. And today I'm going to be talking about whiskeys. This is a very big category, and like I said earlier, I'm going to split it into at least two. I can't do all of the whiskeys all at once, so we're going to leave scotches out as almost a separate liquor, although they're obviously one of the 6 main liquors, and also did a video on the 6 liquors, and I'll leave that link above, and all of the links I'll also leave down in the description. So without further ado, let's get into whiskeys. So what is whiskey? Whiskey is a liquor that's distilled from some grains. It is rye, corn, wheat, or barley in some mixture. And basically you ferment some of these grains, you let the sugars from the yeast come out of them, then you distill them. And depending on the type of whiskey that you're dealing with, there's slight differences in that. I've got a lot of bourbons down here, so let's talk about bourbons first. Bourbon is at least 50% corn in its mash, which is the mixture of all of the grains before it's distilled. This is a bourbon. Most bourbon is United States bourbon. It might even be the only way you can make a bourbon, but really the distinction is at least 50% corn. This is Woodford Reserve. It's a fairly new American bourbon. It only was founded, I believe, in the 90s. And I think the parent company that owns this is the same parent company, might as well just go right into it, that owns Jack Daniels. Woodford Reserve is, like I said, a fairly newer bourbon, and it is not a Tennessee bourbon like Jack Daniels. They call the Tennessee bourbons Tennessee straight whiskey, but it is still a bourbon. It's 51% corn, and although this was founded in the 90s, Jack Daniels was founded in 1875 by a man named Jack Daniels. And the difference with Tennessee straight whiskey or Tennessee bourbon is, in addition to being 51% corn and aged in charred oak barrels, as all bourbon is, Tennessee whiskey has to be filtered through maple charcoal. And fun facts about the Jack Daniels distillery: they make all their own barrels. They actually make their own maple charcoal on site. And after they're done with their charred oak barrels, they actually lease this to a bunch of other distilleries, some Scotch distilleries, some rum distilleries. They sell their barrels to some Tabasco makers, amongst other things. They go through a lot of barrels. This is the most recognized and widely distributed bourbon in the world, and this is probably what you think of when you think of American whiskey, but there are a bunch of types. This is Basil Hayden. This is another fairly new bourbon. It, I believe, is also founded in the 90s. So these two are 80 proof. Woodford is a 90 proof bourbon, but Basil Hayden is a very high in rye mash. The rye kind of gives it a more spicy, I wouldn't say kick to it, but a spicier note. It's not quite as smooth. It's almost a little peppery. And the more rye you have, the more spicy notes that you'll get out of your whiskey. Here's another American product. This is Bulleit Bourbon. This one's also been around for quite a long time. This one came out in 1830 and founded by a man named Bulleit. This is a 90 proof product. Another Kentucky whiskey, or you'll hear that a lot. Kentucky whiskey or bourbon are almost synonymous. And this one is a very high rye. I believe this is about 2/3 corn and another third rye. This is another one of my favorites. I use this one a lot. I use this one almost for mixed drinks, this one for sipping, and this one, because everybody loves it, you have to have it in your collection. Another Bulleit product that I have is Bulleit Rye. And a rye bourbon is at least 51% rye. So you have something called bourbon, which is 51% corn. A rye is very similar to bourbon, but is 51% at least rye. Let's see. Okay, here's another one that is fairly well known. This is Wild Turkey, and Wild Turkey was founded in 42. I keep this one around. Wild Turkey is not one of my favorite bourbons, but if you can see on this bottle, this is 101 proof. If I'm feeling really frisky or need a shot of something, a lot of times I'll go to Wild Turkey for almost all of my American whiskey shots. I actually find that the 101, and I keep this in stock always, I find that the 101 is almost smoother tasting than the 80 proof of Wild Turkey, believe it or not. And so I prefer the 101 to the 80 proof version of Wild Turkey. And this is, again, a very popular brand. And I also keep Wild Turkey Honey. This is one of the few liquors that I'll keep in a flavor. I'm kind of a traditionalist, but I'll keep this around. It's like the name says, it's honey flavored. It's very sweet. I believe it's only 70 proof. And I'll use this in a flask or for shots when you just don't want to make that sour face as you're sucking down something with a real kick. This goes down nice and smooth, and I do rather enjoy this for a flavored liquor. Let's see. I think that's it for my American whiskeys. I have a Canadian whiskey. This one's almost empty. This is a fairly popular brand, Crown Royal Reserve. And if you know me, when I get a bottle that's starting to get low, I always buy a backup bottle if I'm going to keep it in stock. Let's arrange these a little bit better. So Crown Royal, you'll see this in the purple bag, an 80 proof whiskey out of Canada, so it can't be called bourbon, it's a whiskey. And the Reserve is just aged a little bit longer than the standard type. I carried Crown Royal in my collection for years and years, and I tried the Reserve and I just liked it that much better, so I tend to keep this around. I also, on a whim, tried their 75th Monarch edition, and I don't like it. So when this bottle's gone, it won't be staying in my collection. And those are the Canadian whiskeys that I have. And I also have an Irish whiskey. This is another very old distillery. I say very old. This is the oldest distillery of this whole collection. This was 1780, I believe. A man named Jameson made his Irish whiskey, and this is also aged in oak barrels, not charred, and this is a very, very well-known brand. I believe this is the most popular and most sold brand of Irish whiskeys, and I do rather enjoy this. And before I get to what I'm sipping on today, please leave me a comment in the comment section down below. Which whiskey out of these is your favorite, and which whiskey do I not have that I need to have in this collection? When you guys give me a comment, I always respond, and I'm always interested in what your favorites are. And every so often I'll do a video, I'll get some comments on some things that I don't have in my collection, and I go out and try it and buy it and put it in the collection. So keep those comments coming. What I'm drinking here is, can you see that on screen there? This is Jameson 12 year. This is an aged statement. None of these are age statement. Basically, an age statement means it's been aged for a certain amount of years, and they're telling you it's been aged for that long. With all the rest of these, they don't have an age statement. Some of the blends might have 6 or 12 year whiskeys in their blend, but this is telling you that at minimum, every whiskey that's in this bottle, in this blend, has been aged at least 12 years. And this is very, very smooth. With a lot of these, I'll use mixed drinks, Jack and Coke, Jack and Ginger, Old Fashions. I make a lot of mint juleps out of the Woodford or the Bullet, Manhattans. A lot of mixed drinks I'll use with all of these, but for the most part, this Jameson 12 is a sipping only whiskey. So if you stayed with me this far, please hit that thumbs up. Let's share this with your friends. Anybody that you think might be interested in it or loves bourbon or whiskeys, please share this out with your friends. Let's get this content out to as many people as possible and grow this community. Well, thanks for being with me. Let's always remember to practice responsible drinking. Let's practice kindness, practice compassion, and practice humility. Thanks for staying with me to help me practice the art of doing. There's some great videos over here that you might like. Click here to subscribe. And there's a great playlist down here. Thanks, everybody.